Neat stuff to do.
All kinds of.
You're a guest and doing the work.
Oh, yeah.
All right, welcome back, everybody. We are here now with Peter Tucker from the Vermont Realtors Association. He had requested some time to just fill us in on what he's seeing on S100. As you know, our main focus is on one part of the bill, but we are also keeping our eyes peeled on some of the other sections of the bill as well. And so microphone is yours. Welcome back.
Great. Thank you. Nice to see everybody. Peter Tucker for the Vermont Association of Realtors. And with the chair's permission, I just wanted to give you kind of some of my impressions on Act 250 and you know, kind of where this thing has gone in the Senate and, you know, kind of where it stands here in the House. As well as just commenting on the sections of the bill that you don't see, you know, the appropriation stuff taken out by Senate appropriations, you know, where I hopefully can help. So, I mean, the challenge is, you know, like, how do we find the right place for development? That's really been the big challenge, and who defines that? You know, in the Senate Natural Resources Committee, they looked at downtowns and then the additional overlap areas of neighborhood development areas and growth centers, you know, as a place where they could expand the 1055 definition to 2555. And that's, you know, what we tried to do in the Senate was to say, hey, look, you know, maybe there's more towns that could actually, you know, take advantage of this benefit for a couple of years, you know, and tried to look at towns that do have permanent zoning and subdivision bylaws. And those are the so-called 10-acre towns by the Natural Resources Board. And they have, you know, they do have zoning in place. That didn't, you know, so if you look at downtowns, neighborhood development areas, growth centers, there are 34 distinct communities that would qualify for this out of 253, I think. So, you know, leaves a lot of villages and that sort of thing kind of out. In my mind, you know, when I look at, you know, smart growth, infill development, certainly urban areas, but traditional settlement patterns has always been kind of a standard in Vermont. And to me, that's not Burlington and the big cities. It's the little villages that have the opportunity to have, you know, small infill development, you know, 1 unit here, 3 units there. And what's happened with so many of those builders is they hit 9 and they stop. If it's 5 years, you know, they just wait. And I actually heard somebody talking about somebody who's doing a 8-lot subdivision, and then 5 years from now we'll do 8 more, and so on and so forth. So it really, you know, it has kind of limited growth. What happened when we looked at those 138 towns that had permanent zoning and bylaws, you know, it wasn't just the village center. And, you know, the other designation areas are village centers and new town centers. And village centers really never designed, all of these really not designed for housing. They were really designed for historic tax credits for downtowns and villages. And village centers, according to Josh Hanford, Commissioner Hanford, are not really even supposed to have housing in them. They are just supposed to be that very core center of a village. So that kind of doesn't work. But when we wanted to expand to towns with permanent zoning and subdivision bylaws, you were looking at the entire surface of the town, which is pretty broad. I mean, it would have been 55% of the towns and probably a greater surface area in Vermont, right? So that didn't work for the environmental folks. And that's really the challenge that's going on here. You know, how do we get the right balance? I will say that the Representative Bongartz, his bill, H68, he talks about not designation areas as much, but towns with wastewater and public water supplies. And that, you know, by my estimate, is around 100 towns. So that have wastewater facilities in place that could be, you know, subject to, you know, more infill development and growth. And that, to me, seems like kind of the direction to head in. You know, I think downtowns and neighborhood development areas is too limited. You know, all the towns with permanent zoning and subdivision bylaws may be too great. But by focusing on places where there is wastewater in place, not just the designated downtowns, this expansion would be somewhat reasonable and certainly, kind of what I'm going to talk about with environment and energy when I get over there. So I wanted to make those comments. We've been talking about this a lot. We've been looking at it a lot. And I think that, that a reasonable expansion of the areas that can allow for infill and smart growth makes a lot of sense. So that's my 2 cents on Act 250 at this point. And I just had a few comments on the bill as it exists, that you're looking at right now, and then some comments on the appropriations that were taken out by the Senate. So first, let's see, Vermont Fire Building Safety. This is Section 29 of S-100 is passed by the Senate. I always feel like we ask fire and safety to do an awful lot, and we don't always provide them with, much in the terms of resources. So as you ask them to look at how do we simplify building codes to get more housing available, I think that, keep Mr. DeRocher in mind for some funding. I don't know that that's a major program, but it doesn't have any funding associated with it. Underneath, and I'm back a page, the Vermont Rental Housing Improvement Program, the expansion to newly created accessory dwelling units, newly created units within an existing structure with in a residential structure or with a newly created structure with a VHIP potential for a VHIP subsidy for a unit in a building. Those all make an awful lot of sense. I mean, we need more housing. You heard it from Capstone that's super important to them. How fast can we go? And I think VHIP has proven itself to be one of the better ways to accomplish that. And then I was actually sitting here when the auditor spoke with you, and I'm certain that his comments carried weight. But I don't think he's going to by next year have any kind of data to really work off of to create a really good audit. So, you guys will handle that. And I think, he said it better than I could. But I'm not sure, how important that really is in the scheme of things. So, appropriations took out a bunch of stuff. Some are, I think, more important to us, in terms of, what they're going to do in terms of housing, and also not just, subsidized rental housing, but housing across the spectrum, for first-time home buyers, missing middle. Those are programs that we strongly support. The appropriation for municipal regional planning fund for zoning and bylaw improvements. There's 138 towns with permanent zoning and planning subdivision bylaws right now, but there's 100 and some other towns that don't have that need the help. And you provided some funding last year for those bylaw modernization improvements. And, we'd like to see that continue. 25A, Section 25A was taken out, and that's the Energy Code Study Group. And 25A was the funding. And this is back in the bill that before appropriations in the Senate kind of took things out. We're looking to fire and safety to tell us how to make building more cost effective, how to eliminate potential, zoning or, potential building code stuff so that it's less costly to produce. And the only thing I can tell you about the energy, the RBs and the CBs is they're going to cost more money. I think it's, I want to sell more energy efficient homes. So that it's not lost on us that there is value added by that, but it does simply add to the cost of construction as that. Yep, that's fire safety. I'm going to go fast here. First generation home buyers. This is a program that I know Maura can speak to more than I can, but it's nice to see those funds being utilized. And I think that it's a great way to encourage, folks that have not had the opportunity for home ownership to get into it. Realtors sell homes, so we're certainly embracing home ownership, and that is what we do. Missing middle. income home ownership program. The folks that were on this committee last year may remember that when this first was introduced, the Realtor Association was kind of lukewarm on it. We weren't sure how it was going to work, the subsidy for the builder, the subsidy for the purchaser. But, through kind of watching this program evolve, we've seen it, and did jump on board last year. And it's great to see that the funds have been just, are out there, the arrangements are being made. And, we would certainly encourage that appropriation to find its way through to the final bill. That's missing middle. Yep. And then rental housing, the revolving loan program. This is something that is a new concept this year. What would it do? It would provide some base funding, and it's probably not enough to completely finish a rental project, but in conjunction with other kinds of funding to cause more rental housing to be built and improved upon. It's a new program. It's a big ask. But I think at the same time, it's something that is hopefully would encourage construction and encourage construction more quickly. And then finally, the Vermont Housing Conservation. And then I don't know where I went with that. Vermont Housing Investment Program has, from all outward appearances, has been fully subscribed in the past. There was money in the Budget Adjustment Act for it as well. And, we really do feel that program should continue to be funded, at whatever level can be achieved. Because that certainly is the fastest way to get rental housing online.
Sorry, which one? VHIP?
VHIP, yeah. That's it. Okay.
Did you breathe?
Good. I breathed twice on the Act 250 stuff, so.
Well,
But you guys are, you got to keep you on schedule to the extent that we can.
No, I appreciate your comments as always, and we are going to be working on restoring restoring the elements that were deleted in terms of.
So first generation home buyer, the missing middle, and the VHIP program, I think those are the most important things, in terms of, priorities.
And if we do everything that we should, we don't have to worry about balancing the budget, right? That's not our committee.
That's not your committee.
That's definitely what I heard, yeah.
Good. No, and I'm sorry, that was a facetious comment, but just talking about the funding is very important to us, and getting, we have supported all these programs through our budget memos and certainly through past legislation. And so I look forward to getting it back against 100.
And it is, the Senate takes a different approach to how they figure out the funding, right? The appropriations always pulls it out and then, you get it back in. So, yeah.
State of Maine has joint hearings between the state and Senate budget committees, and they work together. Just lay that out there for us. Yeah.
Wild.
So, thank you.
Gotcha. All right. Thank you, guys.
Where to next for you?
Pardon me?
Where to next for you?
Not sure. No, housing seems to be it. So that's our big thing. Great. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Maura, welcome back.
Actually, you sit right here.
Yeah.
I always learn something when I listen.
We
You can go slow now.
took you up on your offer of being available and being in the building. We had some questions, the committee had some questions we started to review. Existing or the extant sections of S100. And we just had some questions of clarification. Committee, what did we pin for Maura? We pinned first generation, but there was something else that somebody said that we should be asking about. The revolving loan funds and the Mike Pichak plan.
If I may, this is like you all looking at my inbox of the emails I haven't responded to, some of you. And I feel like I'm being called to the teacher and be like, you haven't responded to our emails. So I'm very happy to be here. I'm happy to popcorn around to different topics.
Okay, well, that's where we are in our process. And so as we were reviewing, again, the sections that we got to before we took witnesses, the questions came up about, again, is $1 million enough is really the question for the plans of the program. The question was why only $1 million? And I was stuck by giving the unsatisfactory answer of only $1 million. You know.
No, you're going to say because Maura said that's what we needed. Yep.
No, that's, it's,
Yeah.
any number, but you requested $1 million. If I remember your stats correctly, there's less than 20 that have been processed simply because of the timing of the introduction of the program. You had funding for 35 or 36 more based on what you had received thus far, which may only take you through midsummer. Is what we remembered, or is what I remembered. And then the question put to us today was, as we work on these sections of the bill, putting these back into the bill, what's the right number? And we will listen to your very well-rounded opinion. And, but just also if you give us a realistic view of what you think this program can do in the next year, it would be great to hear.
Mm-hmm. So I'm Maura Collins. I'm the director of VHFA, and I'm happy to launch into some of those answers, but I didn't know, Representative, if you wanted to talk a bit about what was behind the question, because your email was, I thought, great, because you were bringing out some real questions about, we're talking about building equity when we're talking about homeownership versus a rental revolving loan fund, let's say, where there isn't that same opportunity. And should there be equity when talking about homeownership versus rental? And I didn't know if you wanted to.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I'm pulling up my email so I can remember what I said. So, it is, I'd say that my interest, particularly in the first time homebuyer program, is just knowing that Vermont has such amazingly low, abysmal, you choose your adjective, but rates of home ownership for non-white Vermonters, for Black and brown Vermonters. And this program is not uniquely focused on that group, but by definition, when we're talking about first generation home buyers, it is going to capture a lot of individuals who for one reason or another haven't had a home buying experience. In the case of the United States, if their family has just faced significant barriers to attaining that, this could be a program to change that dynamic. And so the VHIP program, by the other hand, is just, by definition, going to people that already own homes. And so just saying, as the committee looking at equity and social equity in this building, just wanted to say, why is it we've got kind of 15 or 20 million for the first three and 1 million for the next one? Because frankly, I was having a conversation with somebody the other day and they asked me why, and I was like, that's a good question. I don't know why. So figured good time to ask the question, because if that program could scale up and use $5 million, then I think it's a good question of is that something that we should be doing? Because I think I've already said why.
And if I can even add to it, it's not just that people of color have a harder time accessing and becoming homeowners, but they also have worse outcomes often. We know in the 2008 to 10 recession, when home prices plummeted, that it was people of color who were disproportionately foreclosed upon and ran into trouble. Some of that was because of the predatory loan practices that happened nationally that were targeted toward minority majority communities. But we also, so my point is that even when people are able to become homeowners, oftentimes there is a negative outcome that can happen there. So I agree with you in the fact that Vermont has not had a balanced approach in terms of investing in homeownership versus rental housing. I shouldn't put a number, but I know it's more than 95% of our public resources go to support rental housing through rental assistance and rental construction and the like. And I think it's about 2% goes to homeownership supports, mostly to support shared equity housing, homeownership. And so that's not unusual though. That's the way the federal system is set up. There's a good reason for that. And that's because the lowest income people are predominantly renters. And we have other ways of supporting homeownership in this country, mostly through financing supports, like a 30-year fixed rate mortgage may not sound exciting. That makes housing so affordable. If we can assume that incomes will grow over time, especially over a 30-year period, you've now fixed most of your housing costs, not utilities, but or taxes. You've fixed most of your housing costs though. And then you can grow your income and your housing becomes more affordable over time. And so having that 3-year fixed rate product through the government sponsored enterprises of Freddie and Fannie, that is very beneficial. And so we shouldn't feel like we aren't doing a lot because actually the federal system is set up to support homeownership. In addition, there's tax policies like the mortgage interest deduction and writing off local property taxes that can help in these ways too. So to the question though of, is this the right amount? I am realistic and I just want to say that I am looking at what we could spend in the next year. So is there demand for 5 million? Is there the demand for 20 million? Maybe, probably. I don't know. Census doesn't tell me how many first time home buyers there are out in the world. But I know that with the pace we're on right now, with the first million we were given, we will be through that in the middle of the home buying season right now. So I would love another million so that we could continue through this season. And I don't know if that would last us to the fall. I don't know if we can get all the way to next legislative season. It's a new program. I can't guarantee what that uptake is, but I can guarantee you I'm going to run out of money with the first million if we do nothing. And I'd love to be able to come back next year and talk about what the findings were. And I hope we get a lot of people of color with this program. I don't want to promise that. I can't. I'm not in control of the whole system and the inputs into this. I can't control the housing stock available and it's very limited. And so that people will be successful in finding a home that meets their needs in the community that they need. And so I would say that if there is a concern that we are not investing enough into homeownership where people can build the kind of equity and generational wealth that will help sustain not only them, but future generations, then a 1-2 punch of this first generation $1 million with the missing middle homeownership construction program is a nice complementary set of tools of 2 ways to invest in homeownership. I do think that we need to keep looking at what we're doing to support homeownership, but let's not forget that there is a lot that happens in the housing market that doesn't come not only through this committee, but through this building at all. VHFA's 49, we just had our 49th birthday yesterday, and our 49 years of offering mortgages to Vermonters has not costed the state money because we are using federal tax exempt bonds to self-sustain an ongoing program that has been offering lower interest rate mortgages to first-time homebuyers for 49 years. And that doesn't cost, that's not running through the state's budget. And we're proud of that. And I think that there are ways that homeownership can be made affordable that are happening that don't necessarily come with appropriations. There are ways that the state has complemented that by allowing us to have state tax credit that funds some down payment assistance. That's been helpful. But I do think that the $1 million is the right amount for now. And I'd like to come back next winter and tell you what the racial makeup of the borrowers are. I think the last thing I'll say is that if it's a $15,000 grant with no expectation of any repayment, there's going to be a good market for that, as opposed to loan programs that not only do you have to qualify for, but then you have to have the ability to repay and all that. And so Could we spend $5 million on grants? Probably, probably not hard, but we're trying to make sure that the grant investments we're making are modest and responsible, because it's not our money, it is the public resource. And so we're trying to find that sweet spot of touching where we need the most direct intervention and where it will be most powerful, and then trying to leverage the ability to invest permanently in homes like we are through the Missing Middle Homeownership Construction Program.
No, that makes a lot of sense, and I would think that I hope we can come back and add more money to it, because we're not going to have a situation where we can put 20 million to this program, 20, let's say it's $1 million in a more normal situation. There's a lot to put towards the program. So, but no, I appreciate the answer. And I also just hope that as we're trying to reach people of color in Vermont, and I think we need to also continue to have new ways of reaching out and to really leverage the local, because a program is kind of is as valuable as it is to who knows about it, right? And to kind of make sure that our outreach is matching our attention as well, because as you say, there will be a lot of appetite for this program. And how do we? I like that this program is just first time generational home buyer, but in certain situations, if like people of color in Vermont don't know about it, it could go entirely to white Vermonters who've never owned a home. And I just don't know that. So I hope that I'm excited about the program. And I think that making sure we're getting the outreach in the way that matches the intention of the section. And then that we have a plan if 2 years from now, all the money's gone. Yep. And we already gave the 60 million to the 3 other programs. It's just kind of thinking like, is there some fungibility within the resources that will remain? Because I think it's an exciting program. And as you say, we do need the data back as well. But anyway, thank you for hearing me out, everyone. That's what I wanted to say.
I also want to say there are some other complementary programs that may be able to help. I'm on a advisory council of the Federal Home Loan Bank of Boston, and they are they're exploring launching a special purpose credit program, which is the federal boring term for how it could actually be legal to do race-based lending, which normally is illegal since 1968. And so, but they've done the research to prove how people of color in New England are disproportionately negatively impacted in the home buying process. And so they're looking, I actually don't know where they are in their launch, so I don't want to say too much about the details, but I think there will be additional tools available to Vermont's member lending institutions of the Home Loan Bank in the future. And so I'm working with them about how we can complement these two programs, and maybe we don't have to give the full 15,000 because they're chipping in with something. And are there ways to work together? So I'm trying to not overly enrich, but also make sure the money gets out there, but look at the full landscape of what's really needed.
Thank you. I have a couple of kind of related questions. Just going back to where you were almost at the very beginning, where you were talking about the federal programs that assist renters versus homeowners. Isn't that because of the propensity for white people to be predominantly, or higher income people that own homes versus the lowest income being, I mean, that makes sense, right?
I'm trying to follow. So we overly invest in rental programs because that's where the need has been concentrated. If you look at the housing needs by income group, it's that under 30% of median has by far the greatest needs. They are by far more likely renters.
I guess what I'm asking is how many of those, I'm sorry to be hungry.
Yeah.
How many of those are people never mind. Let me skip to the next question.
Okay.
Because I can't articulate that very easily.
And I'll be here again. We can talk offline.
How has the federal government and Vermont in particular, because I don't know, I don't have the history of it, but how did we respond to some of those foreclosures, that wave of foreclosures.
Well, if I were a Vermonter who was foreclosed upon, I might have an answer that says not well. But if I look at the data and take that personal impact out of it, which I think is always a struggle, because for those who were foreclosed on, probably devastated them. Largely, we did survive the last crisis, not as impacted as many other states. They were the high foreclosures were in a lot of states that I do think has more predatory lending practices. Our DFR had put protections in place in the 80s that, for instance, if your interest rate was it's still in effect, if it's so much higher than a conventional rate of today, then it literally has to be on a colored piece of paper that you are handed as a borrower to say this rate may not be a good one because it's at least, and I don't know the number, so please don't write this one down, but I think it's like 1.5 points higher or something than if everyone can get a rate today at 6% and I'm offering you a loan at 7.5%, DFR requires that I hand you a piece of paper on a colored piece of paper that says, this may not be your best option and you might want to shop around a little bit before you sign and do this. Those kind of protections and the fact that we have so many community-based banks that really, know their community members and are working with them, we didn't have terrible outcomes writ large at the last crisis. One could also say that we also weren't, pushing people into unhealthy products in the first place. And so therefore they had better outcomes in the long term, as well as, our response and what the lenders were able to do when people started being upside down in their homes. Our home prices didn't crash the way they did in other markets. They dipped, but it was later than everyone else and less than everyone else. We didn't see a 20% drop in home prices only to slowly recover. We saw, I think the number was 5% drop in home prices. So it was more manageable. People weren't quite so underwater.
Just to totally clarify. Do you think that the notification by DFR of the increased lending percent is caused fewer foreclosures?
Yes, because I think that people, and I want to be clear, I'm talking about the 2008 recession, that I think that that people didn't get into predatory loan products in the first place. They weren't charged a 8% interest rate when they could have gotten better. And so then they were able to afford their mortgages more. In this current crisis, I believe I heard that this committee was talking about that we announced on Monday that we're going to be closing applications for the homeowner assistance program, which has been $50 million of federal ARPA funds. Not the kind of ARPA money you all awarded. There was actually other money in ARPA, and there was $50 million for states to help pay past due mortgages, utilities, property taxes, and other fees. And if all the applications in our queue are all eligible and the amount they ask for is how much they actually get, then we will have spent 90% of the money, which is why we could look forward and say, okay, by early June, I believe it's June 12th, we're going to stop taking applications. We want to give people a little notice. And then from there, we'll move to a wait list system. But that program has been very successful. It is coming to an end. There has not been a history of having a program like this ever before that I've heard of. And I think all the national news that I'm reading on industry news is that banks learned a lot about the forbearance process through the pandemic. And I think that a lot of lenders are thinking about using forbearance more in the future because they could see that tacking on some additional payments at the end of the loan term was a way of not modifying the loan and making the payment go up and therefore the housing less affordable, but instead just adding on to that term, keeping the rate, keeping the payments. But now I have to pay it for an extra year or two. And that provided some relief during this economic crisis. And that is a tool that I hope that will be available when it's not required by the federal government, which is what has been happening with the pandemic. So that could be a great tool that could help protect people from foreclosure without meaning that you all have to set up to do appropriations every year to pay past due mortgage payments. And so VHFA knew that this program was going to be ending. We had talked about it with many people before the session even started. And we did not come in with an ask to continue the program because we do feel like at some point it probably is appropriate to start to lean on those other tools that are available and not ask for an ongoing appropriation for a new program that honestly, we've had many decades of not having, and we might have to get used to living without again, as hard as this transition is going to be. And again, knowing that if you're an individual homeowner and something has happened, you can't pay your bills, you are very much impacted.
We have a few more questions.
Representative.
Which
Did you have a question?
I did. I wanted to get to the revolving loan fund.
Yeah, about you.
Okay, so thank you. So I know the treasurer had a press conference about it.
I was there.
I'm unclear about, we had supported allocating money for that. If this is his program, does that mean that we're no longer allocating money? Is it from his fund? I don't understand the evolution.
Fair question. So we asked for the appropriation, you all supported it. Then House Appropriations heard about the treasurer's program and was like, oh, that could be a nice source. I too am excited by the treasurer's program and have a lot of ideas about how that can help housing. So VHFA will be applying for some of that money for different programs. But for this program, it's not a good fit. And I wrote the House Appropriations Committee a one-page memo explaining why it doesn't work. And I'll give you the highlights in a second. They were quite literally on the last day of their having the bill before passing it out and hearing that they had already taken out the 20 million and then hearing on Thursday or Friday that, nope, this isn't a good fit. They couldn't throw 20 million back in. And so now we are having that conversation on the Senate side. So why it's not a good fit are a few reasons. One, the idea and why the governor included it in his budget was he wanted to take one-time money and create a revolving loan fund that would live on for decades to come and keep paying out more. Now, we could have debates about how much activity is going to happen in the out years, as we've talked about, but the idea was that that was a $20 million investment that would stay on. If we have to borrow that money from the treasurer, that means every month we're making payments on that loan from the treasurer. Great rates, treasurer's offering a nice product. We got to pay that back every month. And so as we get in the payments from the developer, we're paying it back to the treasurer. There's nothing permanent there. It doesn't revolve. So we can't call it a revolving loan fund. We can call it a pass-through. And so if it's a pass-through, it means that I need to look at how much we have to pay the treasurer, which based on the documents on his website, 30-year loan looks like it's at 2.5%. And so VHFA needs to charge the developers a minimum of 2.5% so that we can pay the treasurer back. So when I talk about, well, if an employer chips in money or a municipality does, and we can get those preferred projects down to 0%, that's no longer possible. So I no longer am offering employers an opportunity to chip in money and have it be a priority project. I can only go down to 2.5%. So the product doesn't work as well in that way. The last thing I'll say is that the treasurer's product is a great one, but they are not looking to put the state's deposits at undue risk. So it would be great, let's just say, if VHFA was looking to use that money in a otherwise traditional affordable housing product where VHFA had money in it, VHCB did, there were tax credits, there was a lot of money because it's going to protect the treasurer's investment. In this revolving loan fund product, the bank's loan is in first position. Remember, the developer is going to borrow 55% of the money. So if something doesn't go well, which we'll underwrite it, it's not going to be terrible, but if something didn't go well, the bank is getting paid. And VHFA, this rental revolving loan fund, is at more risk because we won't get paid until they get all their money. I'm worried to put the treasurer's money in that position. If I'm borrowing the state's deposits, I think the treasurer is going to want to know that there's some belts and suspenders on some of that risk. And I don't know if that's a great match. We're talking about small developers who may be newer to the scale that they're working on. They're working up to 9 units or something like that. They've only done 1 or 2 previously. They're new to VHFA. Again, we will be underwriting them. We are not going to be too fast and loose with risk. But I don't think for that reason, it's a good fit with the treasurer's program either. And then lastly, I'll say treasurer's not even opening up for applications until you all are just about adjourned. Decisions won't be made until midsummer. So if you all close out and say, oh, I'm sure VHFA will get $20 million of the treasurer's money, I'd love to see that crystal ball because I have to competitively apply among all the other needs in the state. And I don't think we could know that we're going to do well in that scoring and process and all that.
Okay, thank you. That was a great download, concise.
Yeah, but I do love the program and I do think it's going to help support housing, and I'll come back and tell you how we're using it next year if we are lucky enough to be selected, but I just don't think it's the right fit for that program.
So currently, the House budget did not have that,
Correct.
but the Senate is working on putting it back in.
Yeah. Okay, we have 4 minutes. Representative LaBounty, Lamont, and Elder.
I was wondering, looking at crystal ball of yours, and do you have any idea, if there's, rates are going to go down? I don't know if you've heard anything.
I know that there's a debt ceiling debate that I'm very worried about right now. And so I don't know what's going to happen to the markets, but I'm reading the same news as everyone else about the speaker's tenuous grasp on leadership, and I'm a little worried about what's about to happen. We're planning a bond deal in the next few months, and I think we're going to be in for a bumpy road. So honestly, I'm leaning toward doing a bond deal before that hits the proverbial fan, because I'm worried about what's going to happen with rates. But I'm not hearing, the economists are not projecting a continued run up of rates, some slight escalations. I didn't see what the CPI numbers came out at 8:30 this morning.
5.2.
Okay. So, I don't know.
Now, my other question is, do they still have loans for variable rates?
They do exist. They're far less popular now and used far less because I think people have short memory or long enough memories that they remember 2008 and that a lot of folks were caught with arms.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll be really brief. I just was gonna comment on 3 things, on what Representative Elder was referring to in reference to the program, and Maura and I have had this conversation at the State Housing Conference and other places, but in the program, the First Gen Homebuyer Program, it's more than just marketing and getting it out to folks. It's also, and I don't know if you mentioned this while I was stepping out, but it's also about whether home buyers would be mortgage ready at the time. And so there's also that aspect of it. So even though it's intended to help bridge the gap between diversify the home ownership model, it's when people go, they have to be mortgage ready to be able to get the loans. Not to mention the type of housing stock that's available. Most people of color have multi-generational families. And so the housing that is available is not big enough. And so they would own a home, but it might not meet the needs of their family. So there's those aspects. So it's a little bit more nuanced when addressing direct issues with people of color for that, but it's a great program. And I'm very excited and very grateful that it exists. And then to add to Representative Burrows, you had asked questions about the state homebuyer program. And so Kathleen had mentioned in her presentation, so they have a homebuyer program. However, part of that and part of the participation rate being low is a similar issue. Mortgage ready, right? Housing stock, and the same stipulations and requirements that require for Section 8 are applied. So therefore, the house that you're purchasing has to be, yes, you still have the same requirements under the Section 8 voucher, even though you're gonna own your own house. And so those requirements create a lot of limitations for people trying to purchase their home. And so, and including the amount of the price that you're allowed to purchase. So there's very strict parameters to make sure you don't go into more debt. But as they were saying, you know, the vouchers that are available, or as even Sue was just saying this morning, right? There's some vouchers that are available, but if, with the requirements and the way the programs are set up, even if you could afford it with your own money plus the voucher, because of the stipulations of that voucher, they can't give you the voucher, therefore you can't afford it. So without the voucher, it's unaffordable, right? Then you can't qualify for the voucher because it's above their stipulations.
Right.
And so because of those nuances and dynamics, it creates this layer of inaccessibility. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to touch on those things.
Did you take more than one breath?
Yes.
Okay,
I don't have another question. I will say I was wrong. It was 5.0, 5.2 is expected.
Okay,
0.2 lower than expected.
good.
awesome. Awesome. All right, committee, thank you. Let's go to lunch. Maura, thank you for your information.